Hi, hey, hello, and welcome. I've thought of like 5 different ways to start this video, but none of them really felt right, so I'm just gonna speedrun this intro. 2020 fucking sucked. No one's gonna disagree with me on that, but there were some games that were pretty good that came out, and some that were pretty bad, and I want to talk about them. But first, there's some things I should go over. This video ended up being way longer than I expected, so it'll be a 2-parter, but we have 4 awesome games to talk about in this first part, so I hope you'll stick around. Firstly, I'll be talking about the games in order of release date, and when I say that, I mean full 1.0 release date. For example, Hades came out in early access last year, but its full release was this year, so it's on the list. Secondly, if I like the game, I'll go over the things that are bad about it first, and then the things that are good about it, and vice versa. I find this way of talking about things much easier because I usually, if I want to praise something, I want to get the shitty stuff out of the way, and if I want to shit on something, I want to get all the good stuff out of the way, so I can just keep shitting on it. And finally, I tried my best to cut down on all the spoilers of any sort, but there will be gameplay spoilers for games like Hades or Age of Calamity. If you want to skip a game that you want not to be spoiled for you, I've organized on the timeline when I'm talking about each game, so you could just skip over to that if you want. Isn't YouTube really cool now? It's been like a year since I made one of these, and this didn't exist when I made one, so like, anyway, without further delay, let's get into the first game. This is a game that I've actually only had for about a month now since I got it during Steam's fighting game sale, but because of release dates, it's the first one up. I really like Granblue Fantasy Versus, so let's get the cons of the game out of the way first. First off, like most modern fighting games, the monetary barrier to entry is very high. The game itself is $60 and the 2 character passes are $35 each. If you want to get characters individually, it's $6.99 US to buy them. At its absolute cheapest, not counting any sales, which is really when you should be buying the game if you're trying to get into it now, Granblue Versus is a $130 game if you buy both the base game and the passes. And all of this is not counting that there might be more character passes in the future. I've never really liked the DLC model that fighting games have adopted over the years for this exact reason. If you've been playing the game since launch, then it feels fine, since you're basically paying $7 every 4 months, or you're paying $35 every year or so. But if you're trying to get into a fighting game and you want all the characters, you're basically forced to cough up double the original price of the game to experience its full content. This turns off a lot of players, myself included, to a lot of games they might otherwise enjoy. Like, I love how BlazBlue Cross Tag Paddle played in the demo, but in order to buy it now, I'd have to pay like $200 to get all the characters and the game, and once I did pay that much, I'd still probably get whooped by all the players who've kept the game alive for that long anyway. And here's the other flaw of Granblue Versus, it's lacking in a steady influx of new players. Because so many new games come out each year and because of the steep paywall, many games fall victim to what people call dying, where a game loses the ability to draw in new players, and when they do, it's hard to keep them. Granblue Versus is kept alive by a small but active community who's been playing the game since it released in February. Since they're the only ones playing the game most of the time, a new player jumping in is going to go against players way better than them the entire time. For people who like fighting games a lot, this isn't the biggest deal, but the average player is probably going to lose their first 10 matches and go play something else because it doesn't feel good to lose. I have 20-ish hours in Versus right now, and about 5 of those hours were spent in the training room learning combos, while the other 15 hours were spent queuing into online matches, matching with someone far better than I am, and proceeding to get absolutely shit on the entire match. For me, it sucked, but I knew that the more I played, I would eventually learn how to win, so I kept going, but this doesn't work for everyone. Even I took a couple days break from the game, and what brought me back was the fact that 2 of my friends were also getting the game, so we could improve together. In the end, this isn't really a flaw of the game, it's just an unfortunate consequence of both the fighting game genre that allows the better player to win 100% of the time with no chance of the worst player getting lucky enough to squeak one out, and the fighting game market that has new games coming out very frequently that all cost a lot of money to get into. Finally, and this issue is much smaller and might not even be real, the command inputs feel a little strange in this game. As a quick example, one of the characters that I play, Normaya, has a confirm out of a heavy attack where I can quarter circle back into quarter circle forward, which for those of you not well versed in fighting game terminology, imagine I take the left control stick, move it down, then swing it like a pendulum from the left side to the right side in like a semicircle motion. I'll put something on the screen to better visualize it. If I do it fast enough after a heavy attack, I can dash to my opponent and send them further into the corner, gaining stage pressure. If I do it too slow or misinput it, I can end up in a super vulnerable or in a disadvantageous position. In games like Dragon Ball FighterZ, BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, or even Smash, This input is pretty easy to do, and I almost never miss it because of frequent practice. However, in this game, it feels way harder to consistently do. Like I mentioned before, it's possible this isn't even an issue if I just get better at the game, but after a decent chunk of time invested in practicing the inputs, it still feels a little stiff. Definitely not something that ruins the game though. Alright, with the cons out of the way, let's move on to the pros. Because it's much easier for me to start with hyperbole and work from there, I'll say that Granblue Vs has the best art style in any fighting game I've ever played. The game is gorgeous. Its backgrounds are incredible, and each one feels very unique from the last. Granblue Vs is based off the gacha game just called Granblue Fantasy, and that game has amazing art as well, and I'm glad that it carried over into this game. Character portraits and models just look really cool. The gameplay itself is very fun. It's a much more grounded fighting game, similar to Street Fighter, where neutral is a lot of throwing out projectiles and trying to confirm a long attack into a combo. Jumping in this game is less for mobility and more of a call-out, since it's really easy to punish a stupid jump. I mentioned above that it's hard for beginners to get into the game, but it's not because of the game itself. In fact, the game is one of the most beginner-friendly I've seen in a while. You only have one character, so there's no need to focus on when to use assists in fights. There's a designated command input button, which I've dubbed the Easy Bake button, where you can press it plus a direction to do your specials, instead of having to learn the command inputs like quarter circle forward and dragon punch. This allows for beginners to see what each character does at a glance without having to already know fighting games. Speaking of specials, there's no meter, which I love. The only meter is below your health bar, and it's used exclusively for your super. Specials are instead cooldown based, which I think keeps the game much more balanced and way less prone to snowballing. In other games, you might find yourself escaping corner pressure only to find yourself with no meter, while your opponent has a lot of meter from hitting you that whole time. In Granblue, if you escape corner pressure, you'll have all your abilities up, and you might even be able to strike your opponent who has no abilities off cooldown. I think it also makes combos more inventive, since you really have to develop a combo on your feet depending on which cooldowns are up. Also, if you use the Easy Bake button to input a special, that special will have a longer cooldown than usual, which provides a worthwhile incentive to newcomers to actually take the time and learn their command inputs. Finally, the music is just awesome. I haven't been able to listen to it much, since I usually have it off so I can hear my classes in the background while I'm playing in school. Don't tell any of my teachers that. However, when I do hear it, it's very well made and hype enough to get you in the mood to play. Is Granblue Vs a good game? I would say that yes, it definitely is. Would I recommend Granblue Vs? If you really like fighting games and have some friends who also do and are really interested in the gameplay, look for a sale to pick it up. If you're looking to get into fighting games, this one is pretty good to do it. However, if you're not really in the mood for a fighting game, I'd probably save your money for something else. This game makes me feel a lot of ways, and I'm gonna try and cover those things very quickly since I don't actually have any footage for this game and will be using trailers instead, since I tried recording footage and there was literally nothing I could think of doing on my island. So yeah, that's one of the things I don't like. Animal Crossing New Horizons might have had the greatest launch period of any video game ever made. It came after a 7-year Animal Crossing drought, during which only a mobile app and an interior decorating simulator were given to eager fans. It came out with a really cool looking Animal Crossing Switch that built hype. And of course, as I'm sure you all know, it came out 1 week after the start of the global lockdown, allowing everyone to stuck in their homes to play the game as much as they wanted. And everyone did, including me, mind you. In 6 months I played the game, I clocked 235 hours into it. That's more hours than my main file of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, my favorite game of all time, more hours than Breath of the Wild, which has been out since 2017, slightly more than Fire Emblem Three Houses, which has been out since August of last year and is another one of my favorite games, and it's just barely under my time in Splatoon 2, another game that I've had since its release in 2017. That is a lot of time on one game, but I'll be completely honest with you, I barely remember any of it. I'll try to talk about what's good in this game first, but the biggest pro is its art style. This game, and I'm gonna say this a lot in the video, so get ready, is gorgeous. I think this is the closest Animal Crossing's art direction can reach to perfect. It's a joy just to stare at your island because everything just looks so clean. And I think that's it. I can't think of any blatant pros of the game besides its charm. Everything else I have to say, if it isn't completely negative, is just a slightly weaker con. Time in Animal Crossing is something that has been a controversial point since the series' inception. The game runs on your Switch's internal clock. The days will pass when real-life days do. When Animal Crossing first came out on the GameCube, this was a fine addition because people didn't play video games back then as much as people do now. However, now, when people are playing games for more than 90 minutes a day, this real-life time mechanic feels more like a hindrance than a fun part of the game. Many people agree and disagree on this point, but personally, I believe that the inclusion of the real-life clock is slowly killing a franchise that could be so much better. Not only is it annoying to be blocked out of a game because, oh, you have to wait a day for this to be built, but the synced clock allows for Nintendo to kind of fuck the game over. The natural appeal of Animal Crossing is to make the island of your dreams, but Nintendo didn't do a great job of that on release. If you were like me and got tired of waiting to play the game you paid $60 for and time traveled forward by changing the date on your Switch's clock, you found that there wasn't much of anything waiting for you on the other side. Animal Crossing New Horizons, when it first came out, and to some extent as it is now, is the most bare-bones Animal Crossing game ever put out. Nintendo has opted to make it a live service game to patch these issues, slowly adding holiday events and seasonal goodies to keep players coming back. But that's the thing. It's not to add great things to our great game, it's to keep the players coming back, because that's all it is. By forcing the real-life time restrictions onto the game, most players, myself included, just got really bored of the complete lack of anything to do once you complete the few main quests. So Nintendo keeps releasing these holiday events to make us hop back on and check them out. Then after 2 days of playing it, they usually leave again and play something else. Now, all of this sounds really stupid. I understand the whole point of Animal Crossing is to make up your own fun. It's a sandbox game, you do whatever you want to do, you yell at me through your screen. I promise I can hear you. And to you I answer back, if New Horizons is trying to be a sandbox game, it failed miserably at that too. One thing I was gonna praise New Horizons for was the DIY system. Had I played just a little bit less of this game, I probably would be praising them for it in this very video. On the surface, this system adds longevity to the game's sandbox aspect, but dig a little deeper, and it's oftentimes more trouble than it's worth. The DIY system is Animal Crossing's system for crafting, where you gather materials like sticks and wood from trees, or stone and iron ore from rocks. The act of collecting materials adds something for you to do each day, which is great, but it ultimately does more harm than good. There's two glaring issues I have with the DIY system, one of them being its incredibly restrictive nature, and the other being its very limited use. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, most of the sandbox aspects are tied behind the game's money, bells. If you wanted to make the town of your dreams, it would require tediously farming up enough coin to give Isabelle in order to construct the things you want. New Horizons' DIY system should have remedied this, if any thought was put into it at all. The serious lack of any self-awareness is insane when it comes to how poorly this system was implemented. Once you reach the end of the main story of the game, and you're told to live your life as you want on your island, you quickly realize that bells are still all that matter in this game. DIY crafting is used to make furniture for around your island, as well as tools to gather more DIY materials with. And on that note, your tools can break, and they break often, and there's no endgame upgrade that will stop them from breaking. Things like bridges and inclines, which are introduced to you with a tutorial that has you create a bridge with the DIY feature, can only be created with bells. It would have made a lot more sense to have the player gather up lots of stone to create a stone staircase with the DIY system, right? Well, not in this game. Instead, you're required to cough up 200k bells required for it, so Tom Nook can call a contracting service from thin air to create your incline for you. Do you want to remove your incline? That costs money too. Also, everything takes a day to do, so if you want to place another incline in the meantime, you'll have to wait until tomorrow. The DIY system feels completely useless when it comes to real landscaping because you're only using it for random pieces of furniture. You'll often find that most of your house's storage, which is very limited and still doesn't have any way to expand it until an update drops in the following months, is filled with stone and wood that you'll never use. Remember how the DIY system added collecting materials to the daily checklist? It's removed almost as quickly as it was added once you've collected about 5 days worth of materials, because you'll either have so many that you'll never use, or too many that they won't fit in your storage. I'm mentioning over and over again that the DIY system is used to craft furniture, but another big issue I have is the inability to actually make that furniture. From a game design standpoint, it makes sense for DIY recipes to be drip-fed to the player. New Horizons only has a handful of different materials, so giving you all of the recipes at once would leave nothing to work towards. I'm not opposed to slowly unlocking the recipes with game time, if the recipes given to you weren't completely random. Essentially, every day you log on, you are given 2 DIY recipes via bottles that wash up on the shore. One comes in the morning and the other at night. 2 recipes a day is a perfectly fine amount to keep me interested, but the problem appears when 9 times out of 10 I don't get 2 new recipes a day, and sometimes I get no new recipes a day. The recipes you get are completely random, meaning you have the chance to get duplicates. These duplicates have low monetary value, so they don't help you work towards a new bridge or incline very well. They can't be learned to remove them from your inventory, and they can't be stored. When you get these duplicates, they either sit in your inventory, which you don't have very much of to begin with, or sit on the floor of your house, which will lower your rating with the Happy Home Academy, because they view it as trash on the floor. The only good use for these duplicate DIY recipes is to trade them with people online in exchange for ones that you don't have. But this often becomes a catch-22, because they don't want to trade with you if you don't have any interesting DIYs to offer in return. Even if you do manage to trade them for a DIY you don't have, none of that transaction was helped by Nintendo, meaning it doesn't fix this design flaw, it's just the community finding a workaround for it. There are plenty of other small things that I dislike about this game, but most of them are direct results of either the real-life clock or the DIY system. I've talked far too long about this game and I don't want to do it anymore. I spent 150 hours playing on my first island, got bored and restarted my island, then spent 85 more hours logging onto the game hoping I'd get a new DIY project, only to be disappointed over and over again. If I were to log on now, I would be greeted to piles of rotten turnips that I never cashed in on because I was too lazy to get up and check the random prices and hope that I would make enough money to afford another incline. Do I like this game? A bit. Do I recommend this game? If you want to have an incredible amount of fun for exactly 2 weeks, go for it. If you want a sandbox game to clear your head after a long day of work, just go play Minecraft instead. It's half the price and double the value. It's really weird to see Riot Games finally be Riot Games. I'm coming up on 5 years of playing League of Legends, and for most of that time, Riot Games was just the company that made League. They didn't do much else but make board games. In 2020 though, that's really changed, and the games that made that change are both really good. Most, if not all, of this video is opinion, but right now, I am CO in my correct opinion, aka fact. Legends of Runeterra is the best card game to ever exist in terms of ability to play. I've loved card games ever since I started collecting Pokemon cards in school just like the rest of us. I always preferred Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit more though. Despite loving the cards themselves, as well as the games you could play with them, I never got too big into Pokemon TCG or Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I never had the money to actually play the game. Ever since Hearthstone came out and pioneered online card games, every single game after it has followed suit with their monetary model. You buy packs with real money, those packs contain random cards, you rinse and repeat until you have enough cards to make a deck you want to make. Occasionally you have some form of currency, it's usually called essence, that you get from duplicate cards or cards that you want to get rid of, and that essence can be used to create the exact cards you want. This model is a nightmare for players who want to play the game but don't have a dedicated credit card for it. I know this is a big word, but it is impossible to play Hearthstone free-to-play and have a good time. Trust me, I've tried. Pokemon's online trading card game is the same, though from when I last played, you got packs by purchasing them in stores and scanning a code inside the pack. So if you want to play Pokemon TCG online, you still have to buy packs, and now you have to find a place to put all the cards you just opened. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links felt the same as the other ones. It's a fundamental problem with the idea of trading card games. How are you supposed to make a card game competitive and monetized? I believe Riot Games, ironically enough, are the first people to properly answer this. Legends of Runeterra is incredibly generous with giving out cards. There are 8 regions in the game, and right after you complete the tutorial missions, you can select a region to claim rewards from. The rewards are in the form of a path, with each reward getting better as you advance along the path, but requiring more XP to unlock each time. You get XP from, guess what, just playing the game. Your first couple wins of the day give you bonus XP, and every day there's a daily mission that gives you a big boost for completing it. This reward system does away with packs and even makes the player feel like playing the game, since playing it means they're slowly unlocking the cards of the region they want to use. The second big way Runeterra helps players unlock cards is with the weekly vault. Remember the XP used to level up region rewards? That XP is also leveling up your weekly vault. It starts at 3 bronze chests and can reach a max of 3 diamond chests. The chest contains 5 cards each, or 10 cards once you reach the higher chest tiers, and a lot of essence, which you can use to make the cards you want. Every card in that chest has a chance of upgrading in rarity or turning into a wild card, or both. A wild card is basically a card of a certain rarity that can be used to unlock any card of that rarity that you want. Let's say that you want a certain rare card. If you have a rare wild card, you can unlock it. You're guaranteed a random champion card every week. Reach vault level 10 and that becomes a champion wild card, so you can unlock any champion you want. The vault makes unlocking cards feel possible without spending money, which makes the player want to play more, which makes the vault level up, which gives them more cards, so on and so forth. And this also fixes the issue of card expansions. Other card games tend to drop expansions where they add a whole chunk of new cards to test out. In those games, the only way to get to the new expansion cards is to buy packs and hope they give you the cards you need. If that didn't sound anti-consumer enough, a new expansion usually coincides with a new rule set. Because other card games like Pokemon and Hearthstone have so many cards by this point, there are seasonal rule sets made that determine which cards are able to be used in decks. When a new expansion drops, those cards are most of the cards that can be used in the rule set, so players have to spend lots of money for the chance of getting the cards they want just so they can even participate in the upcoming season. Runeterra does away with this issue completely since unlocking cards is so easy. Plus, I haven't even touched on how they monetize the game yet. Every way of unlocking cards I've mentioned so far has just been from playing the game, but how is Riot making money from this? Well, the average player can spend their money on some fun cosmetics that Riot has made, and they look really nice by the way. But the pros and streamers will obviously have some money to burn on unlocking cards. In Runeterra, there are no packs. You can purchase wild cards and unlock the exact cards that you want. It's kinda crazy how much I'm praising a game for giving us the ability to get what you pay for, but unfortunately, that's an uncommon thing in gaming these days. And I still haven't even talked about playing the game yet! All of these incredible, never-before-seen ways of unlocking cards are amazing. I bet I've already sold some of you by just talking about that. But all of these amazing free-to-play features come bundled with a really fun and really smart card game, which is why I am CO, in my correct opinion, aka fact, Legends of Runeterra is the best card game ever made, period! Unless Shadowverse or Magic the Gathering is secretly doing all of these things better, but from what I've seen, it isn't. Plus, it's my video, so who cares? Each person selects a deck of 30 cards from a maximum of 2 of the 8 regions. Each region provides a unique set of abilities and win conditions. Do you like relentlessly attacking your opponent again and again and again? You'll probably love Noxus and Demacia, whose units are built around pressing the advantage and forcing an answer from your opponent. Do you love having a huge, high-cost card on the board? Consider using cards from Freljord, who all have high health totals and can frostbite enemies to remove their attack total. Or use the dragons from Targon, who cost a lot, but grow stronger and stronger for each unit they kill. Do you like controlling every single action of the game and having an answer to everything your opponent does before they even do it? Do you like the ability to stall for infinite amounts of time for you to find exactly the card you need to win the game? Do you like making the game impossible to enjoy for your opponent? Then you probably love cards from Shadow Isles, who revolves around death and lifesteal, or cards from Piltover and Zaun, whose cards focus on threat removal and sudden changes of plan. There really are cards for everyone in this game. For example, the deck I'm using in the background of this game is using Freljord and Noxus, a powerful combination for just about any circumstance. I can use Frostbite to stall for my tankier Freljord units and use those tanky units to supplement my fast attacking but hard hitting Noxus units. Two key differences from Runeterra and other card games are champions and spell mana. When you have extra mana at the end of your turn, that mana will be banked for later as spell mana. You can hold up to 3 spell mana, and it will stay there until you use a spell. This allows for some awesome strategies to take shape. You can, for instance, use all of your regular mana to drop a strong unit the exact turn they're available, but still have 3 spell mana to react to anything tricky your opponent tries to throw at you. The second and very important part of Runeterra are champions. These champions are obviously the champions taken from League of Legends, but because the Legends of Runeterra developers had time to divert attention to polish, something League developers don't often have time to do in between creating new champions and balancing the game, the champions in Runeterra breathe new life into otherwise bland and uninteresting champions. My favorite example of this is Vladimir. The Hemomancer in League of Legends has voice lines that are mostly just blood puns because he was created in 2010 and hasn't been updated since.
I'm a universal recipient. Care to make a donation?
But in Runeterra, he's an imposing, eccentric, and very classy man with an entire cult dedicated to following him.
I'm absolutely parched. Let's see what they're made of.
In-game, champions are the crux of your deck. Most decks are built around activating their champion's powerful ability. Every champion has a unique ability when they are first summoned to the board, but each one is a condition to fulfill. Once that condition is met, the champion will level up, which gives them a whole new set of powers usually capable of winning the game, and a gorgeous, there we go, I said it again, animation upon level up. And these animations have only gotten more extravagant as time has gone on. What started as, oh, Garen spins his sword when he levels up, just like how he does it in League of Legends, has become, oh, Tom Kench's contract floats up into a waterhole, only to be snatched back down by his tongue, just like how in his lore, he gets people to make deals with him before ruining their lives. And they all just look so fucking cool, man. Back to gameplay, a great example of how champions can turn the tide of battle by leveling up is Teemo. Teemo is an elusive unit, meaning he can only be blocked by other elusive units, and every time he hits the Nexus, he adds 5 mushrooms to the opponent's deck. If the opponent draws a card with a mushroom on it, that mushroom will deal 1 damage to the Nexus. However, once Teemo levels up, every time he hits the Nexus, he doubles the amount of mushrooms in their deck. A successful victory with Teemo will see your opponent having like 100 mushrooms in their deck with only 20 cards left, meaning every time they draw a card, they're taking on average 5 damage. I forgot to mention that each player only has 20 Nexus health, and once it hits 0, you lose. So Teemo has the ability to end games incredibly fast if he gets lucky enough. This segment has lasted way too long, so in short, Legends of Runeterra is fucking amazing. Do I like this game? Absolutely. Do I recommend this game? If you like card games, 100%. You don't even need to know League of Legends to play it, and if you do, there's some bonus callbacks that you'll enjoy. If you don't like card games, definitely give it a shot. It's free, and unlike any other card game made before it. And the last game we'll cover in part 1 of this video is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Releasing on May 29th, 2020, almost 10 years to the day after the original released on the Wii, this game pleased fans and newcomers to the series alike with its incredible story, engaging characters, and fun gameplay. As for me, well, I joined the series a little late with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 when it came out for the Switch. Xenoblade 2 is now my favorite game of all time, so when I heard Xenoblade Definitive Edition was coming out, I knew I had to try it, especially with everyone who played the original hyping it up to be one of the best games they'd ever played. So what do I think? I think it's a little, tiny bit overrated. However, this game fucking rules! Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition tells the story of 2 titans, the Bionis and the Mechonis. The Bionis is the land of organic life forms like humans and animals. The Mechonis is the land of machine life forms like the villainous Mechon and the mostly forgotten Machina. You play as Shulk, and he and Ryan set off on a revenge mission after Shulk's childhood friend and crush Fiora is killed by a large Mechon with a face, who's conveniently called Metal Face. Thank you, game, for making this very easy to understand. What starts as a revenge plot quickly develops into an all-encompassing journey through every inch of the Bionis and Mechonis, learning about every species and environment. Xenoblade Chronicles is a story about breaking the cycle of violence and choosing your own path to walk. But I mean, before I gush about this game, I did say I was gonna do the bad stuff first, and if I like the game, so let me get it out of the way. I used to dislike the combat of Xenoblade Definitive Edition. However, while replaying through this game for footage and for my own leisure, it grew on me a little bit. However, I still have my issues with it. For one, the arts you use are on timer cooldowns. There's no way in combat to speed up these cooldowns. All you can do is wait for them to come up. When you're using the arts, the combat is incredibly fun, but in the earlier stages of the game, I often found myself using all my arts, then sitting there with the controller on the table until my arts came off cooldown, then using them again, then rinse and repeat. Thankfully, you didn't have to rinse and repeat that many times, because the enemies would die very quickly due to me being way over their level. The balance in this game is a little all over the place, and it's all directly tied to side quests. Every Xenoblade veteran will tell you that you don't have to grind at all in this game, but I completely disagree. Side quests in this game are a lot of kill X monster or collect X material, and while my brain certainly feels good when the quest complete shows up on my screen every 10 minutes, there's just so many of them that sometimes it gets tedious to do. In my first playthrough, I did most of the side quests, but skipped some of the ones that were out of the way. I was basically 5 levels under every single story enemy. I'm not ashamed to admit this, but I turned on casual mode, and it still took me bashing my head against the enemy a couple times in order to make it through. And before any Xenoblade people get on my ass, yes, I was using the ether gems, it didn't help much. However, now, in my second playthrough, I opted to go for completing all of the side quests, and at around Alchemoth, I must save 3 or 4 levels above every single story enemy, and the only fight I've lost is due to the random level 80 enemies walking into my fight, or the enemy having spike damage that I haven't prepared gems for. The balance on this game feels like it teeters on this razor edge between too easy and way too hard, but I can't seem to understand if it's because of how I played the game or if it's just a flaw of the game. But I thought I'd say it because it is just really weird. Overall, it's not exactly a flaw of the game, because in my second playthrough, I honestly don't care if a game's too easy, if I grinded all the side quests for it to make it that way, so it's less of a hindrance, more of just something that bothered me. Speaking of the Ether Gems, the endgame of this game feels like shit. With only 7 party members in the endgame, it doesn't feel like there's much variety when it comes to fighting super bosses, if you can even fight them at all. Now, in order to fight super bosses, you need to spend hours grinding the specific enemies that have a chance to drop the right ether gems to fight them, and then you have to craft the ether gems, which have a chance of not even working. After that, your party members have to be as close to their level as physically possible, because otherwise you have a giant chunk of your chance to hit them or dodge attacks taken away on top of the obvious gap in level, meaning that you have less attack and HP. This game does everything it can to make sure you can't ever even try and squeeze out a victory against a strong monster. You are forced into properly preparing for it, otherwise you get curb stomped instantly. For some people this is awesome, and for most of the time it's fine for me too, if it feels like I made the choice to prepare for that fight. Sometimes I just want to try and fight a level 80 monster at level 70, and sometimes it works out against all odds. Xenoblade takes away every possible way of that happening. And then, once you level up all the way, once you finally have all the gear and the ether gems to fight the monsters, just isn't that fun. The most obvious way to kill super bosses quickly is with chain attacks, but because of how broken chain attacks are, they had to make them have a random chance of continuing. Sure, there are plenty of ways to increase the chance of it continuing, like having high tension, having high affinity, chaining together the same color arts, but it is still random, and when that chain attack drops for no other reason than, whoops, you got unlucky, it just doesn't feel good. Challenge mode, which was added in Definitive Edition, is not even a worthy challenge to be called challenge mode. It's just a bunch of enemies thrown at you, which if you get lucky enough with chain attacks, they can be taken out instantly. At least with Xenoblade 2's challenge mode, there were new enemies and incentives to play, but this one feels like a tack-on mode to say that, ooh, we have a challenge mode in the Definitive Edition. One tiny thing, and this is more of a nitpick, but I think the environments are just a little boring. This was something I feared when the game was first announced, since there were only 2 titans. How much different would the game's environments look throughout the story? I'm thankful to say that this game proved me wrong. Well, half wrong. The environments on the Bionis are each incredibly unique and interesting, something I had no idea would happen when I first thought of it. I thought the whole thing would look like Gower Plain, and I was pleasantly surprised. Excluding Sword Valley, which is half outside, the entire middle stretch of the story is just walking through identical parts of the Mechonis. It's really easy to get lost because everything looks the same, and I wasn't really too keen on fighting anything or doing any side quests in that area because I was just so bored by my surroundings. Xenoblade 2 has a similar issue with the world tree, but for the 3 chapters you're in it, you see a bottom level which contains mostly storage robots and waterlogged rooms, a mid-level which is entirely outside, and a top level which contains large elevator rooms and an enormous docking site for defense robots. I wish Xenoblade had done something similar. Maybe take us outside the Mechonis somewhere in the middle so we can see how far we've climbed. Maybe make the actual climbing of the Mechonis more interesting than just finding a key to unlock the next part of the Mechonis. I would have liked something like that to break up the monotony. My final gripe with the game is the ending of the story, which I won't spoil because you really should play this game, but I'm still going to try and talk about it in vague terms so the people who have played it, or the people who saw this part, played the game, and came back later to watch the rest of the video, I love you if they did this by the way, can understand what I'm saying. I think the twist villain of the game was a little bit underdeveloped. Because the atmosphere of when the villain is revealed was so hype, as everything the game had been building towards comes to fruition at that one moment, I think it feels like the villain is way cooler than they are. But when you take another look at it, I realize that moment is actually what's really well made. But the villain themselves is just a little bit bland. It's also a shame that the game's ending is a bit cliche, and goes for an ending that's very similar to most stories like it, despite starting off so unique. Okay, that's the things I don't like. Now let's talk about why this game fucking rocks. For starters, the story. I'd like to clarify that just because I say something is overrated doesn't in the slightest mean that it's bad. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I love Xenoblade's story. The world of the Bionis and Mechonis is unlike any other, and I can definitely see myself revisiting it in the future. The combat, though I ragged on it in great detail earlier, is awesome when it works. The characters all feel real, even the smallest side characters feel alive in this living, breathing world. Xenoblade's affinity chart really helps with that because it makes side quests feel more than just fetch quests, and it makes it really feel like my decisions matter in this game instead of me just playing the game. The fact that the affinity chart, when filled out, doesn't have everybody liking each other is so cool because it's just like real life. Not everyone is gonna like each other in real life, and sometimes that's okay. An incredible strength of this game, something that every day I wish Xenoblade 2 had, is this game's almost perfect opening act. The game starting with the Battle of Sword Valley, having you play as Dunban with the Monado, then quickly cutting back to Shulk's normal life a year later is something that keeps you wanting to know what happens next. Just when you get bored, the game snaps you over to Fiora's point of view to deliver food to Shulk, and it gives you a look at how Dunban is recovering after the battle we just played in a year ago. Then when you get bored of collecting ether cylinders for the army, bam! A mech on attack for the first time since the Battle of Sword Valley. Dunban rushes out of his house, arm barely working, to wield the Monado. He injures himself during the fight, and Shulk, without any second thought, grabs it to protect his friends. Then, suddenly he can see the future. As soon as all this power is granted to the player, bam! We find out we can't even scratch Metalface. The battle ends, and Fiora races in to save us before she's stopped by Metalface. He reels his arm back, and plunges it into her. Shulk's scream echoes throughout Colony 9.
I'll kill you!
Metalface's hand recoils to reveal red blood. She's gone. This cutscene also reveals another strength of this game, Adam fucking Howden. The other voice actors in this game are also very good, but Adam Howden's performance as Shulk is transcendent. He conveys emotions and delivers lines in ways that no other person could do, but it increases the impact of the story tenfold. I love Xenoblade 2 so much, but Rex's voice actor doesn't even come close to the level of talent that Adam Howden has. He's fucking brilliant. There's so much more I could say, but I'm not really even sure to put it into words. This game, when it hits its stride, feels untouchably good. I didn't even talk about the music of this game yet, which is something you really need to experience to understand. Even if it's just going on YouTube and listening to the soundtrack, do it. I don't know how to describe how good it is. Do I like this game? Hell yeah. Do I recommend this game? If you have a Switch, get it right now. If you don't have a Switch, buy one, and once it shows up at your house, buy it. This game is so good, and it's definitely worth every penny you spend it on. Well, that's all I have for today. This was gonna be way longer, like I said before, but because I sorta put off writing the script until a couple days ago, this is gonna be a two-parter. A shame, yeah, but there's still so much I want to say and so many more games to cover, so be sure to come back once part 2 comes out. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I do these things because I like to talk about things I like, and it makes me happy that there are people who want to listen. Consider subscribing if you want to know when I upload next, which, knowing myself, could be in 2 weeks or next year. Either way, I'll see you guys next time.